My favorite blessing of it is just this like web of relationships that you create. You know, I have.
Hey, thank you so much for coming to visit with me today. Can you share a little bit about you, your interests, hobbies, work?
Yeah, so I just grew up not far from here, just went to Ogden High. My husband grew up around here too. My dad was a professor at Weber State. His dad was as well, which of course we didn't know till later when we met, but they knew each other and things. We lived in Washington for a couple of years, my husband and I. When I was younger, I really loved all art sorts of things. I always thought I would be like an actress, and I loved drawing and things. And then in college, I did kind of an about face and majored in biology and loved all the sciences. But those creative things still kind of work their way in. I like to, not in any professional level, just of my little family. I like doing writing and I like photography. But maybe the most pertinent thing for this discussion is I was the 10th child in a family of 11. So I grew up in a huge family, and now my husband and I have sort of recreated that because we now have 10 kids. So almost recreated it.
Do you think you'll make it to 11?
I don't know. I'm 44, so.
Oh, okay. I wondered if you're trying to completely recreate. So tell us about your family, and was having 10 children always your plan? How did you know that was what you wanted?
So I can't, there's kind of like a surface level that I can talk about this big family that I just sort of tell people if it's just like an in passing question, and there's like this more deeper spiritual level. And so the kind of surface answer is that I loved growing up in a big family, and my husband loved growing up in a big family. We were both at the end of our big families, and so we didn't really have the work that maybe comes with like little kids and siblings and tending. We just got to be carted around. We loved it. We love the dynamics of these relationships, and so we both just wanted a big family, and that's kind of what I tell people just on the surface level. But that wanting a big family really only takes you so far when you become the one in charge of the big family, because that's a very different thing. You know, raising a big family is 100% different than just being in a big family. And so that desire to have a big family probably got us to about six, maybe 7 kids, maybe. And then after that, it really became a really spiritual journey that was really individual and involved just a lot of tears and prayers and trying to figure out what the Lord wanted for my life and what I wanted, and maybe even what things I had agreed to do. You know, I believe that we agreed to do certain things before we came here, and trying to figure all of that out and trying to balance that with the needs of the kids I already had. And it was, you know, people sometimes I think have this kind of vibe of like, oh, you were just fine with however many kids, you know, just kind of this blanket statement. And I've even joked, you know, like, I had 8, what's one more? I had 9, what's one more? But and that's, you know, funny to say, but the truth is, as anyone who has even one kid knows, is one more is everything. You know, one more is an entire new human with the potential to become anything, and to have all their own different issues and struggles and problems. And, you know, one more it's an entire life. And it's so yes, I did want a big family, but this still became a really almost grueling spiritual journey getting to this point of getting particularly these last few ones here.
So what were the early years of motherhood like for you? How do you compare them to today?
You know, on a practical level, they're just obviously very different. When I just had a few little kids, I remember, you know, taking kids, you know, on play dates or to the park or things. And now life is just so full that if someone, you know, ever's like, well, do you want to get so-and-so together for a play date? I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? You know, there's just things are more full. But maybe on like I don't know the word here, but on kind of a deeper level, I once heard this talk. I don't even remember who it was by, but the guy that was speaking was actually talking about like our spiritual journey, and he kind of talked about like points A, B, and C, and he said how when we're young, we just have this innocence and this just like perfect hope and faith, and we believe everything, and it's very sweet and beautiful. But then most of us move into like point B, where life doesn't necessarily add up to this sweet innocent first idea. You know, there's challenges, there's questions, there's things that don't make sense or that don't seem fair. But in this talk, he said, but that's not where we're supposed to stay. And a lot of people sort of stay there, that we are supposed to move now to point C, where we kind of regain that hope and all of the good things from point A, but that they now are filled with this deeper meaning and this deeper understanding. And I feel like that's like a perfect description of this journey of motherhood, because I do feel like when I just had my first little babies, it was just so... It was hard. I mean, but it feels like it was so simple, and they could be everything I wanted, and everything would just be this perfect, bright, And then you kind of move through life, and my kids are wonderful, but there's health problems, and there's emotional problems, and there's things that as a mother you can't do, or that you fail at, or and you kind of get hit with all these realities of this isn't going to necessarily play out exactly like I think that it's going to play out. But I feel like that has led me to this point, where I have regained this kind of bright hope for my family and for my children that's maybe independent of them following the course exactly that I want them to, that it's kind of this new realization of that there is purpose in their existence, and that there is huge value in what they're going to experience and what they're going to learn and what I'm going to learn from it, even if it looks not at all how I thought. In my 10th, when she was born, I just remember having this feeling, which of course I feel for all of my kids, but I felt it very strongly with her, just this certainty that her life and her experience, there's nothing more important. And I don't know what that means that's going to look like, but so it's a beautiful place to be. I sometimes kind of miss that, like, just sweet innocence where there weren't all of the complications and the things that keep you awake at night, and this is a good place to be. It's been a really worthwhile journey, and it's like information or understanding, I guess, that I feel like I can apply to all of mankind now. Like, I have this deeper understanding, I feel like, for the value of the existence and the life and the experience of so many people, because I've felt that, and I felt that hope I can't quite explain it, but so that's kind of, I think, the difference. Maybe I've changed a lot in my understanding of the worth of a person's existence, basically.
That's big. So when you have exhausting, whether emotionally or physically, when you have those exhausting days, what gets you through? And I also want to know, what are the best parts of your days, and maybe what are some of the biggest challenges of your days?
The best part of the day, of course, is when everyone's asleep. I'm sorry that is true. No, there is something sweet about all your kids being asleep.
They're so sweet when they're asleep, aren't they?
Yeah, there are perfect parts of every single day. You're two kids just playing so happily together, a toddler saying the cutest thing in the world, or just having a call from my daughter who's just off at college. There's happy, perfect parts in every single day, or having a daughter that can drive now, that can go pick up another kid for me, just happy things. But there are also a lot of exhausting things, and I know, people just see everyone dressed and ready at church or whatever, and they think, oh, you've got it put together. And I'm like, I spend a lot of time crying in the bathroom. That's a reality of my life. Mornings. Yeah. The worst parts, I think, are just that I have this ideal of what I want to give to my kids, emotionally and spiritually, intellectually, and of the good things I want to do. But there is just so much. I feel like so many of the most important things of life don't get to look important most of the time, like, because they have to play out in this backdrop of just mess and demands and shortcomings. That's where life plays out, is in the middle of all of that. And so sometimes it's really hard to keep this focus of the importance and the significance of things. And so for me, the hardest parts of the day are when I just kind of feel crushed by all of that insignificant stuff that just is demanding me and needing me. And sometimes I feel like, for me, the thing that gets me through is I do spend a lot of energy towards spiritual things, because I feel like that increases my perspective and helps me to continue to see this bigger purpose and in value, even when all that's crushing it. And I often don't see it at the moment. When I'm crying in the bathroom, I don't see it. I just see consumed in the difficult things. But I feel like it's because I have felt it and seen it so many times when I am focusing on those things that I'm able to tough it out. And sometimes that's all it is. I wish there was a will, but I'm able to tough it out through those moments. So,
as your family grew, how did you adapt, especially as your kids grew into teenagers? The teenage parenting.
Right. Well, luckily, I don't know what would have happened if I had just given a baby and then suddenly handed this passel of 10 kids at all these ages. I would have just been like, I don't know. But luckily it happens a day at a time, and it just sort of naturally you grow into these other things. But I do think that adapting a lot is maybe letting go of a lot of things, or changing things that don't work. Because there are certain things that I look at young me as a mom that I was so adamant about, or that we would always do, or that my kids would never do, or whatever. And I just sort of think, oh, that was sweet and dear of you, you know. And I think that it maybe pride-wise, it might have been difficult to let go of some of those things that I was so adamant about. But I think that you have to be able to recognize, like, this isn't working anymore, or just this doesn't matter to me anymore. You know, even dumb things like, oh, my kids don't drink a bottle past this age, and now I'm like, I don't really care how long they drink a bottle, you know, I just want to sleep. But I think that a lot of the adapting is just being able to kind of shift, you know, and in the things that you hold tightly to, and the things that you change, and the things that you realize your family needs to do differently.
How has your relationship with your husband evolved as you parent together?
That's an interesting question. You know, we've never really known life without kids. And my husband and I we have a very happy marriage. Of like, he's a good person. And I know that is, I have so many loved ones who have had really difficult marriages and a lot of really awful things and a lot of just big challenges. So I know that that's not always the case. And I don't know if marriage is a struggle and something that's difficult in your life. I don't know how, factoring all these kids in, I don't know what effect that would have. You know, I don't know if that would help pull you together or pull you apart. But I feel like for us that we would certainly always like a lot more time, just the two of us alone together. But I feel like for us, having such a big thing that requires so much from us and unites us so much, it hasn't left us a lot of room to just be distracted off in other areas away from each other. You know, we just have to kind of be working together, and we have to trust each other and rely on each other. And so I think it's been good for us. I don't know, it's hard. I can't compare what it would be like if we hadn't gone down this path, but I feel like it's been good for us.
You feel like you two are mostly on the same page when it comes to...
I feel like that I can recognize that the areas where we aren't, maybe it's good. You know what I mean? Because I know that there are some things where maybe he sees it differently, how we should deal with something with our kids, and maybe that's good, you know, maybe to have that balance so that it's not all me, because I might be getting it all wrong.
What are some things you do to keep yourself in a healthy mindset each day? What kind of self-care do you practice?
This probably speaks poorly of me, because it was probably mostly jealousy or something, but I used to really resent that term self-care. Like, I think I would just sort of feel like, well, that's nice. That's something, that's a luxury for the rich and the people that have a lot of time, or the people that have a nanny. Like, you know, like, make sure you go to your spa, make sure you have all your time alone. And if you can have that, that's wonderful. But realistically, I can't. You know, I've got 10 kids. I have a husband who works long hours. You know, it's not going to happen. And so, but I've learned that it's maybe just how you define it a little bit, you know. I do try to, like, there's a few things, like I like to run. I've run since I was in high school, and it's sporadic. It's not like there's just not time for me to get out even most days with little people at home and stuff. But running is something that's really good for me mentally. And like I said, I like to write a little bit and things. So those, I suppose, are kind of self-care. I think for me, probably the biggest self-care is kind of what I alluded to earlier, is like my spiritual self-care. Like, I feel like I cannot do this. I can't have this constant grueling demands if I don't feel something bigger, if I don't feel the purpose in it, if I don't, you know, if it doesn't mean something. And so I try to, like, even if it's my kids are watching a show, like, I try to find like 10 minutes a day where I can just go pray even when I don't feel like praying, because I feel like that kind of unlocks that. And even just the music I listen to, you know, if I'm alone driving or things, I try to really feed my spiritual side, because I feel like even though I'm not going to have big chunks of time for self-care, I feel like that's maybe the most important self-care for me right now.
Parenting is challenging. How do you balance being flexible with being strict? So what guides you as you discipline or guide, or
a lot of it is probably just personality and instinct, and and again, that is probably why it's good to have my husband. I think that there are certain areas where he is a lot more strict and where I'm just more let it go, and vice versa. And so I think that that's helpful. And I think that I probably get it wrong a fair amount. Like, that's one of the things that I have learned about parenting that's maybe different too from when they were little. I think when they were little, I just assumed I just like shaped them perfectly, and it's all about what I do for them. And I'm realizing it's also really about this huge learning process and growth for me. And I mess it. Like, you can't learn and grow like you don't usually do it perfectly, learning and growing. And so I think I probably mess it up a fair amount. But I try to be very prayerful, you know, in what I do, and I try to govern out of my father-in-law, he always says, you just love them, you just love them, you know. And I think that my husband was raised maybe a bit more strictly than I was raised. My parents were very relaxed, but they had that common thing. They taught us good principles, and they really loved us. And so I try to make those decisions when I can more out of love than out of panic or fear, which is difficult. Sometimes I do mess up and do it out of, you know, frustration or fear or whatever. And then I guess I just kind of rely on hoping that I really do believe that somehow, even the things where I mess up, that somehow the Lord will turn them for good for them and for me, even if we go through some messy stuff in the getting there. So,
what are some of your favorite blessings of having a large family?
I talked about those perfect moments, you know, like just that are so sweet with little toddlers or things. But I think my very favorite blessing, and I can see this already in my family, and I can also see it because I grew up in a big family and I can see it catapulted what my family will look like way down the road. My favorite blessing of it is just this like web of relationships that you create. You know, I have older brothers who are more like uncles to me, like these close uncles, because they were like leaving the home by the time I was growing up. And then but then they have kids that are like some of my best friends that seem like younger siblings. And there's just this like constantly growing web of relationships that is really beautiful. And the connections and the support, because I feel a lot, and I'm sure every parent feels this way, but particularly when having 10 kids, you know, I feel overwhelmed a lot about all the needs of theirs that I might not be meeting because I'm spread so thin. But then I remind myself that growing up in a big family, my mom maybe couldn't do every single thing for me, but I had 4 sisters who I would turn to for support and for all these things, and so I see that on my own kids, and it's the happiest thing I see. I have my 3 girls that are older together. I love seeing them, like, they're going off shopping to Target together, or they're watching a movie together. You know, I love just these relationships that it creates. That's probably my very favorite thing.
I love that. What blessings do you enjoy from being a mother, and how has motherhood blessed your life personally?
Well, I think maybe one of the biggest things has been this kind of the growth thing. Like, this is one of those backwards blessings, but that I'm sure you can relate to, and any mother probably can. There is nothing like mothering, particularly as it goes on, to show you like your failings and your weaknesses. Like, I sometimes joke that if I didn't have kids, or if I just, you know, only had like 2 kids and I would think I was a pretty good person. I would think like I am just pretty on the ball, you know. I'm sweet, I'm calm, and it's just having this constant like opposition pushing against me, whether it's just, and I I love my kids, but you know, whether it's just the demands, even the constant demands and the needs, and I had a passel right at the end. So I had my 4 last ones. My oldest was just barely 5, I think, so they were just packed in there. And so I have this passel of people just that I feel like are just screaming. You know, it just it shows me my failures constantly, which I don't like. But I think it's really good. It keeps me like constantly relying on the Lord and constantly turning back to Him, because I just can't do it on my own, and I can't just kind of rest on this idea that I'm a good person. Like, I'm constantly being shown like where I need to improve, and I think that it's hard, but I think it's been a huge blessing for me, this kind of growth journey that they've forced me into.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about mothering during this pandemic, not even just the pandemic, just the craziness that's been going on this last little bit. And I mean, in my home, it's definitely affected kids from my youngest to my oldest. So can you share some of the changes or challenges that you guys have had through this, and maybe how it's affected your kids, how you've adapted and kind of overcome to help keep the normalcy as best you can, and the happiness and the safety in your kids' eyes? Yeah,
I love that you said that, because well, in some ways, I do really feel like we have been affected less than a lot of people during this. We had, my husband's job hasn't been affected. My kids, other than that, 3 months or whatever it was at the end of last year, and a few soft closures this year, they've actually been able to be going to school. but still, it was so hard that time when school was closed, because if I were homeschooling, which at one point I did with some of my younger kids for a while, I would have kind of a similar curriculum for my kids, and we'd veer off for ages. But this was a billion kids each with completely different agendas that needed me sitting there, and I would cry every day while we were doing that. It was so overwhelming. And I had a son who was on a mission in El Salvador, who was stuck in this very strict military-style quarantine where they could be arrested if they left, and then he got sent home without even getting to say goodbye to people, and then he's back in Las Vegas, and and a daughter that graduated during this whole. So we've had some of the difficulties, but I think that it's kind of what you were saying. I think that the main thing is that you just want home to always feel as much as possible like a place of normalcy and safety and peace, and I feel like that's just the kind of trying to focus on the routine things that you do, and trying to focus on the things that are happy and fun, and it's really not maybe that different. Like, we've had personal things that have come into our lives that have been more difficult than this pandemic for us or whatever, and I think that I don't know, I try to talk about it, but maybe it's just in the way that we try to live. The idea that I try to instill in my kids and want them to have is that tragedies or difficulties or whatever, that they aren't going to come in and veer off their path or their plans or what they came here to do, that their lives are meant to play out through these things, if that makes sense. That the things that they are supposed to accomplish and that they are supposed to learn those things are going to happen amidst all this mess, and that's going to kind of shape what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do. And so I think just kind of trying to have that feeling, so that I don't want them to ever feel like, oh no, this happened, so everything is ruined. I want them to feel like, okay, so we keep plowing through this because this is the path towards whatever important things we're supposed to accomplish. And so that's kind of the goal.